Mother Wangari.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also agree with Honorable Junet that we give them a second chance, because sometimes you'll have a member who will be here, not do very well as an MP, but when become a senator or a governor, they do exemplary job. And because they had not been dismissed on grounds of being ineffective or having done any issue that was against the Constitution, that we give them the chance and allow the appointing authority to do as he wishes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I sat in this vetting process, and it has come at the right time when we are reviewing our foreign policy as a country to be able to align to the shifting global dynamics, Mr. Speaker, and to be able to align to our national interests, Mr. Speaker. And that is why these appointments are very, very crucial. Mr. Speaker, the issue of Dr. Karanja, a very, very well-published and renowned academic, Mr. Speaker, has a very wide experience, Mr. Speaker, and it has also come at the right time when we are expecting to hold the Conference of Parties, or what you call COP30, in Belém, Brazil, this year in November, Mr. Speaker. So we are hoping that he will be able to help us also navigate as we send our team to be able to negotiate and make progress for our country. Mr. Speaker, the other thing we were able to raise to Dr. Karanja is specifically of the missions or ambassadorial missions becoming the first stop of our Kenyans who are outside the country, especially students, when they are stranded, when we have issues in other countries. These ambassadors must be reachable, must be accessible, and must be responsive to our citizens outside the country, Mr. Speaker. These ambassadors, permanent rep, and consul generals, Mr. Speaker, are the image that we are projecting of the country and of the president in the outside world. Mr. Speaker, I also agree with the previous speakers in terms of at the time when we get a person declining an appointment, Mr. Speaker, it definitely sends a very bad picture to have Accra becoming rejected twice, Mr. Speaker. So it is important that, as has been said by the mover, that the head of public service does proper consultation with the appointing authority to ensure that if someone is not ready to take up an appointment, you reject it at the right time. Let it not go to the Gazette notice, because when it goes to the Gazette notice, even if you write to the clerk, it will already have gone out, Mr. Speaker. So the timing is very critical that we have it checked. Mr. Speaker, the issue of linking the country with our country is very important. It has become a global village. We hope that these three appointees will do a good job. I want to also pick up on AJAABU Namwamba, a person who has served in this house for 10 years, has been a cast, Mr. Speaker, and we were able to interrogate in terms of his knowledge, in terms of representing us in the UNEP and UNON. And one issue, Mr. Speaker, that I personally feel about UNEP and UNON is that despite being hosted in this country, if you go to Switzerland, if you go to New York, you will see the linkage between the national and domestic interests with the offices of the UN that are located in those areas, Mr. Speaker. I feel like Gigiri in UNEP and UNON, they feel detached from what we are doing as a country. So I would hope, as he promised, that he will be able to act as a bridge between getting the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, the national interest of this country linked into these offices, Mr. Speaker. Let Kenyans also feel them as part of the global world. Mr. Speaker, the issue of Haiti is very critical. The person who has been nominated there, who is Gabo, Mr. Speaker, has been in the police for over 30 years, ended up as the DIG, has been in the policy implementation at that level, Mr. Speaker. And the one question we hope and we actually put up to him is that as we already sent our first contingent of police officers to help restore peace in Haiti, we will be looking that he'll be the go-between for those officers, because first of all, for obvious reasons, the officers are not unionized, Mr. Speaker. It would be very unfair or unfortunate for our issues, especially of welfare of those officers, to go to the media. We see them on BBC, we see them in other areas, complaining that their welfare is not being taken care of, Mr. Speaker. So we'll be hoping that when Gabo reports, if appointed and if passed in this house, Mr. Speaker, he will be able to do a good job to ensure that he's the go-between between these officers and of course other Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, who are in that area, who would actually be threatened by any issue or who would be having an issue of welfare. They would wish to communicate so that they're able to sort it out in-house before it gets out, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that being said, I hope that we can also as a country be able to develop a foreign policy as it is being done now but through the ministry that is based on fundamental principles of peaceful coexistence so that we can be able to preserve our national security and also have peaceful coexistence in the global world and where we sit. With that, Mr. Speaker, I support. Thank you.
Ole Sunguli.
Mr. Speaker, I will stand to support these appointments. Being appointed to be ambassador, as you did appoint me when to go to China, is one of the biggest, one of the most important jobs that you can get as a country. Actually, it's the only time you can be called Your Excellency without being elected. And that shows you the importance that is attached to this particular office. Mr. Speaker, I concur with the committee, except when I listen to the chairman of the committee describing, for instance, Dr. Andrew Karanja, and I listened to our friend Mother from Gilgil saying that he's well-educated, but the chairman says that we appointed him, notwithstanding the fact that he cannot communicate very well. Now, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, of course the duty of an ambassador is to communicate, to speak for the country. I find one thing that is being omitted all the time, that ambassadors are being vetted or appointed. It does not happen in Western countries, that you are appointed to a Portuguese-speaking country and you can't speak Portuguese. You are appointed to a French-speaking country and you can't speak French. Now, if Dr. Karanja does not communicate well in English, what do you think about him communicating well in Portuguese? I think we're like Honorable Juliet is saying.
Order, Julius. There's a point of order from Wangari.
Mr. Speaker, I don't remember anyone saying that Dr. Karanja cannot communicate effectively in English, because he's actually a graduate of a PhD holder, Mr. Speaker, and was very fluent and very well conversed with the English language. The only issue we had was the issue of speaking in Portuguese, and we've had others who have gone, including yourself, without speaking the local language.
Yes, Janet.
Mr. Speaker, of course.
Hold on, Sunguli. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I want to also say that having a PhD does not mean that you know English. You can be having a PhD and you don't know English, because you saw the other day in Eldoret, there was a university that gave honorary degrees of PhDs and people were in goals. How did those people speak English? How can you confirm that those members speak English? But it's not.
Order, members. Honorable Sunguli, I appointed you to China without you knowing any Chinese language.
So, Mr. Speaker, that is why, with the benefit of the hindsight, I'm able to advise that it becomes a problem. But I took an immediate measure and learned Chinese. And Mr. Speaker, you can also attest that when you came to China, I was able to translate some Chinese to you. I'm just saying that in future, as we draft this policy, let us take that into consideration so that we can appoint people who are fit for purpose. And when I talk about lack of communication, I was referring to the speech of the chairman of the committee, that Dr. Karanja said that he is going to improve his communication skills once he gets back to Brazil. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I also want to commend His Excellency the President for appointing Mr. Nur Gabo to be Consul General.
Yes, Bashir, what's the point of order?
Motion, sir. Honorable Speaker, I want to.
Sunguli, do you want to be informed?
You know, I want to. Yes, you can let him inform.
Go ahead.
Honorable Speaker, I just want to inform Honorable Sunguli and the House that the point where our chairman said that the nominee said he's going to improve on his communication skills was not particular on the speech, but it was, we asked him a question on why, when he was the Minister for Agriculture
that he kept quiet when so many things were happening, including the issue of vaccination. And he said there was a lapse and that in future he's going to improve on his communication skills to the public and the people he serves. Thank you.
Yeah, that's why I said he was appointed in spite of that fact. But Mr. Speaker, I was at the point of saying that I wish to thank His Excellency the President for appointing Mr. Nur Gabo to be Consul General to the Port-au-Prince in Haiti. That, like Brazil, Brazil is the only place where we have our embassy in South America. And I hope that this position that Mr. Nur Gabo has been appointed to becomes a position where he is ambassador to the Caribbean, rather than just a consul general to Haiti. But it is a testament, Mr. Speaker, of the fact that the mission in Haiti is actually now getting some fruits. Contrary to what we had predicted here in this house, it seems like the brave sons of Kenya are at long last making a difference in Haiti. And I hope that Mr. Gabo will, if his presence in Haiti, in presence in the Port-au-Prince, will in fact now enhance our responsibilities in that place. And it is very important that we eventually take this office away from Haiti to in fact Kingston itself, so that the rest of the Caribbean can come under the loop of Kenya, because we need the Caribbean countries when it comes to our diplomacy. We have our foot in South America. We need to extend that to Santiago in Chile. We have our foot now in Port-au-Prince. We need to extend that again to the rest of the Caribbean. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that the ambassadors in abroad ought to be looked after very well. I don't know the position currently, but when I last visited one country, it looked like the salaries were delaying, some of the allowances were delayed, and it is very embarrassing if the embassy abroad does not get its payments due on time. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Thank you. Mutunga.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to the adoption of the committee report on the appointments. Honorable Speaker, I have worked with and I know Dr. Karanja very well. Honorable Speaker, Dr. Karanja worked and retired from the World Bank. And the World Bank is not any mean hirer. The World Bank hires the best. So it's about the best brains that we have in this country. Honorable Speaker, we have had issues in the ministry. And probably the question may have tilted this response.
Yes, Kainan, what's the problem? I see an officer in mechanical gear. He's trying to fix